They say you learn who people really are when the masks come off. Mine came off with the clink of a wine glass and a quiet insult that shattered decades of dignity in front of the people I called family. It was Sunday evening. The dining room flickered warm with candlelight and the low murmur of family chatter. Roast chicken, red wine, and laughter filled the space, but I was still like a cracked statue seated at the head of the table, smiling on cue, speaking only when addressed. The grandmother. The afterthought. My name is Eleanor Grant. I built G&H Interiors from scratch with my late husband 42 years ago. From a cluttered garage and a hand-me-down typewriter, we turned dreams into luxury spaces for high-end clients across the East Coast. We poured our lives into it, and when Arthur died, I kept pouring. Through grief, through menopause, through the aching loneliness that only widows know. And for that, I was rewarded with a chair on the board and silence. Respectful, hushed silence. Until last Sunday. Honestly, my daughter-in-law Blair laughed, swirling her Merlot. No offense, Mom, but Eleanor doesn't even do anything at the company anymore. She just shows up for the Christmas card photo. The room fell still like a snapped violin string. I looked up from my plate. Blair was smiling a bright, perfect, PR-trained smile. My son Adam choked softly on his potatoes, but said nothing. My granddaughter Lily glanced at her lap. The comment hung in the air. I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it. Something in my chest shifted, not pain, not even anger. Something colder. A recognition. The kind you feel when you realize the wolves were inside the gate all along. I excused myself. No one stopped me. I didn't sleep that night. I walked the garden paths Arthur and I laid with our own hands. I stared at the stars and whispered the name of every sacrifice I had made. I had trusted Adam and Blair with pieces of the company. Let them modernize it. Brought them in when I could have sold it off. I had been proud, fiercely proud of how sharp Blair was in meetings, how confident. I used to say, she's the daughter I never had. And now she called me worthless. In my home. At my table. So I did what I do best. I made a plan. Monday, 7 a.m. The morning fog hadn't lifted when I stepped into the offices of G&H Interiors. I wore my favorite navy blue pantsuit, the one with the gold trim Arthur had always loved. My heels clicked like a metronome across the marble floor. No one greeted me, they barely looked up. A few interns whispered. I climbed the stairs to my office. The key still fit. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. My desk sat untouched, still lined with photos. Arthur with his ridiculous sun hat in Venice, Adam at graduation, Lily as a toddler covered in finger paint. I turned them all face down. At 8:15, I called a board meeting for noon. Mandatory attendance. At 12 o'clock sharp, every chair was filled. Adam fidgeted. Blair sat confidently, one manicured hand resting over her phone. She didn't look nervous. That would change. Thank you for coming. I began, standing at the head of the room. I won't take much of your time. As founder and majority shareholder of G&H, I've made a decision. Effective immediately, Blair Grant is removed from her position as COO. Her contracts are nullified, her access revoked. HR will escort her out after this meeting. The room gasped. What? Blair's voice cracked. She stood. You can't be serious. I met her eyes, unblinking. I'm entirely serious. Adam. She turned, panic rising. Say something. Adam was pale. Mom, let's talk about this privately. No, I said. This is where it happened. This is where it ends. You're making a mistake, Blair snapped. You're emotional. This is about yesterday, isn't it? It's about every yesterday, I said quietly. Every day you walked past me like a ghost. Every decision you made behind closed doors. Every time you dismissed the legacy that built this company. You don't have to like me, Blair. But you will respect me. Security waited outside the door. Blair was escorted out stunned, silent. Her mask cracked clean down the middle. That was the day I reclaimed my voice. But this story isn't just about revenge. It's about the silence we let grow around women once they're done being useful, once they've mothered, mentored, built, and bled. It's about the invisibility that creeps in like fog. And how, if we're not careful, it becomes truth. That night, I sat by the fireplace and reread the company's founding mission. I thought about the homes we'd designed, the families we'd seen cry happy tears walking into rooms we'd imagined for them. And I realized something. Legacy isn't a photo on the wall. It's a voice that refuses to be silenced. It's a woman who walks back into the room, not to beg for a seat at the table, but to build a new one. And this time, no one calls her worthless. The following days passed in a strange quiet. No one from the board dared question my authority, not openly. The press release was crafted carefully, citing strategic realignment and organizational restructuring. Blair's name was gone from the leadership page within 48 hours. But whispers traveled faster than news. By Wednesday, I could feel the atmosphere shift. Assistants stood straighter when I passed. Junior designers knocked before barging into conference rooms. Even the senior partners, the ones who used to greet me with shallow politeness, began addressing me with a curious mix of deference and fear. It was strange. Power, when returned, feels heavier than when you first carried it. I didn't fire Blair out of spite. I want to make that clear. I fired her because somewhere along the way, she forgot what we stood for. She forgot we were never just selling lighting fixtures or Italian marble, we were selling belonging, elegance, memory. She turned G&H into a machine, optimizing people like spreadsheets and mocking anyone too slow to keep up. She forgot that companies have souls, and mine was being choked to death. It was time to breathe again. On Thursday, I walked the design floor, something I hadn't done in almost a year. "Morning, Ms. Grant," a young man at the drafting table said nervously. He had sharp eyes, ink stains on his collar, and that jittery kind of genius you only find in people who still dream in colors. "What's your name?" I asked. "Jonas." "What are you working on, Jonas?" He turned his tablet toward me. It was a nursery design for a brownstone in Brooklyn. Soft yellows, hand-painted clouds, a little reading nook shaped like a crescent moon. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was tender. "You have a good eye," I said. "You think in stories." His face lit up like a child praised by a teacher. "Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to see this in the next concept meeting." He nodded, blinking fast. I moved on, but I knew I'd just shifted something for him. That's what leadership used to be, not intimidation, but ignition. That night, Adam called. I didn't pick up. He texted, "We need to talk." I responded, "Not yet." Because the truth was I wasn't ready. There was love in me still for my son. But there was also grief. The kind of grief you don't feel until your child looks the other way while someone disrespects you in your own home. I needed time to feel all of it, to let the betrayal settle, instead of smoothing over it like I had done for years. By Friday, Blair's allies began their maneuvering. 2 department heads resigned. One publicly criticized my decision on LinkedIn, and she called it an emotional overreach by an aging founder clinging to legacy. The post went viral in a small, awful way. I didn't respond. But the next day, our HR inbox was flooded with thank you notes from current and former employees, from interns who'd once been yelled at by Blair for breathing too loudly, from designers who'd been told their ideas were too sentimental or not edgy enough, from women over 50 who'd been subtly pushed out of meetings they used to lead. I read every message. I cried through most of them, and then I wrote a new internal memo. Subject line, "We begin again." The next week, I called a town hall. No glossy slides. No branded slogans. Just me, standing at the front of the atrium in front of 120 employees and twice as many doubts. "I won't pretend I didn't disappear," I began. "When Arthur died, I shrank. I let the company move forward without me, and I told myself that was graceful, that it was time for younger voices. But that's not leadership. That's retreat. And in my absence, something hard and cold settled in. Some of you felt it. Some of you left because of it. Some of you stayed and adapted." I paused. "I'm not here to turn back time. I'm here to remember why we started. We designed spaces where people could fall in love again with their lives. That purpose doesn't age. And I know some of you wonder if I'm strong enough to lead. Let me be very clear." I stepped closer to the crowd. I didn't build this company to be liked. I built it to last. And I'm done apologizing for still being here. The silence after was thunderous. Then someone clapped. Then another. And then the room roared. That night, Adam came to my door. I answered. He looked tired. Not corporate tired, soul tired. "Can I come in?" I nodded. We sat in the same kitchen where the dinner had happened. It felt colder now. Or maybe we just did. "I should have said something," he said. When she said that, I just froze. I know. She's not a bad person. I never said she was. But she forgot how to treat people. She forgot how to treat me. He looked down at his hands. "She's devastated. She thinks I abandoned her." And I think you abandoned me. That landed like a stone. I didn't mean to, Mom. I know, but intention isn't enough anymore. We sat in silence. I'm proud of you, he said quietly, for doing what you did. I looked at him. My son, grown and lost and trying. Thank you. The healing will take time. Blair moved back to her parents' house for a while. Adam visits me more often now, not always with words, but with presence. We walk the garden again. We remember. Lily, my granddaughter, started shadowing our creative director. She wants to study design. She wants to create things that matter. I see fire in her, the kind that doesn't need to be loud to be real. I'm teaching her what it means to listen to a space, to make it sing. I'm not naive. I know the world doesn't favor women like me. Older, unyielding, sentimental. But I no longer shrink for the comfort of others. I do not accept invisibility as the price of aging. And I will not be silenced in the name of progress. Because true progress honors its roots. And my roots run deep. Weeks passed. The storm settled, but the air never returned to stillness, not entirely. The company was changing. I was changing. And like anything worth building, it was painful. Painful, but necessary. Some days, I would catch my reflection in the elevator mirrors, a silver-haired woman in heels and lipstick, back straight, jaw set like a woman 30 years her junior. And I'd think, who is she now? The truth? She was becoming herself again. One afternoon, I received an email from a woman named Celeste. She had worked for G&H in the 90s, one of our early hires when we could barely afford our own coffee machine. She wrote, Eleanor, I don't know if you remember me, but I just wanted to say that watching you take your power back, it reminded me who I used to be. Before I left design. Before I gave up trying. Thank you. You didn't just fire someone. You reminded me I'm not done yet. I remembered her. She once stayed late for 2 weeks straight to finish a client's Parisian-inspired bedroom before their surprise engagement party. I replied, I remember you. You were never forgettable. Meanwhile, inside the company, the deeper rot began to show. It turned out Blair had made more enemies than I realized. Not personal ones, she was far too polished for that. But systems she'd installed under the guise of efficiency were strangling creativity. Budget caps on design software. Layoffs disguised as restructuring. Vendors unpaid for months. Clients who hadn't heard from a human voice in over a year. And worst of all, a project called G&H Future. A secret initiative to slowly phase out all in-house designers and outsource design concepts to AI. It was hidden behind layers of neutral jargon, automated concepting, visual templating modules, efficiency targets. But the goal was clear: cheaper, faster, soulless. I stared at the files in silence for a long time. We hadn't just lost our way. We had forgotten why we started walking in the first place. So I did what I always did best. I called everyone into a room. It was a Thursday morning. Everyone from the creative department, old and new, was summoned to the studio floor. Desks were pushed aside. Sketchpads and laptops rested in laps. Dozens of faces watched me with cautious hope. This isn't about firing anyone, I began. This is about remembering who we are. I handed out blank notebooks. From now on, I want every designer here, no matter your level, to carry one of these. Inside it, draw something every day that doesn't serve a client. Sketch something you love. Something that reminds you of why you ever picked up a pencil. There were puzzled looks. You think this is a waste of time, I continued. But it's not. This is how you remember the voice behind the skill. The fire behind the paycheck. G&H was built on imagination, not metrics. One young designer, Naomi, I think her name was, raised her hand timidly. Will we get time during work hours to do it? I smiled. Yes, I'll make sure of it. The room shifted. It was small, but it mattered. Because before innovation comes imagination. And imagination can't grow in fear. That evening, I met with HR and legal. I didn't want revenge, but I did want accountability. We set up a formal audit of every project Blair had led in her final year. It wasn't about punishment, it was about repairing the harm. Missed contracts, unpaid freelancers, clients who'd quietly walked away without confrontation. Some of it was recoverable, some of it wasn't. But at least now, we were no longer pretending. The media caught on around week 4. An op-ed popped up in a design magazine titled, The Return of Eleanor Grant. What leadership looks like after 65. I winced at the number. 65 shouldn't be a headline. It should be a chapter. Still, the piece was kind. It praised the cultural shift, quoted former employees, and ended with, "Maybe it's time we stop asking when a woman should step aside and start asking when we've stopped listening." I printed it, not out of vanity, but because I wanted Lily to read it one day. Speaking of Lily, she'd been shadowing our lead residential designer, Sophia, for a few weeks now. Quiet, observant. She was like me at that age, watching more than she spoke, absorbing everything like sun through glass. One afternoon, I peeked into the concept room. Lily was sitting beside Sophia, holding a color swatch fan and gesturing toward a mood board. "I just think," she said carefully, "if we lean warmer in the tones, it might feel more forgiving. Right now, it's too sharp, too cold for a nursery." Sophia looked impressed. "You have good instincts." Lily flushed with pride. I stood there quietly, unnoticed. That night, I wrote her a note and left it in her sketchbook. "Instincts are where the best designs are born. Trust yours. Love, Grandma." Saturday came, and with it the dinner. The same monthly family dinner I once dreaded. This time, I hosted it again, but differently. No crystal, no formal seating. Just a long rustic table in the backyard garden, fairy lights in the trees, mismatched chairs, and the smell of rosemary chicken. Adam arrived first, then Lily, holding a small dessert box from the bakery she liked. Blair came last. She looked different. No makeup, hair pulled into a low bun. She carried a bottle of wine, though her hands trembled slightly as she set it down. No one mentioned the incident. No one needed to. Over dinner, the conversation flowed easier than expected. Adam talked about switching departments. Lily shared a hilarious story from the office. And Blair, she listened. Mostly. But near the end, when the dishes were pushed aside and the air grew quieter, she looked at me. "I'm sorry," she said. The words came out like glass dragged over stone. Uneven. Honest. "I said something cruel. And I said it in front of the people who should have defended you." I let the silence stretch. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it. I nodded. "Thank you." That was all I could say. That was all she could expect. Sometimes, dignity doesn't come with dramatic apologies. Sometimes, it comes with a moment of stillness. And the choice not to humiliate someone who once humiliated you. Later, Lily helped me carry the dishes inside. As we stood by the sink, she asked quietly, "Did it hurt?" That night. I looked at her. "Yes," I said. But the part that hurt the most wasn't what she said. It was how quickly everyone pretended it wasn't said. She nodded slowly, like she understood something deeper than her years. "Do you think she meant it?" I thought about that. No, I think she meant to win. And sometimes, people mistake cruelty for strength. Lily dried a plate and whispered, "You didn't." I looked at her. "Didn't what?" "You never mistook cruelty for strength. That's why I want to be like you." My throat tightened. "Then you'll be better than I ever was." By Monday morning, the office buzzed with an energy I hadn't felt in years. We had a new slogan on the front wall, not something we bought from a branding firm, but something someone had scribbled on a whiteboard and that the whole team voted to keep. Design with soul. And that was what we were doing. Designing again. Living again. And for the first time in a long time. I didn't feel invisible. I once read somewhere that healing doesn't happen in straight lines. It curves. It backtracks. It disappears for weeks, only to return one morning in the shape of a smile that doesn't feel forced. That morning finally came. It wasn't dramatic. I was just sitting in my office, Rail sunlight pooling across the carpet, coffee warm in my hand, a new design intern nervously presenting her concept for a womb-shaped meditation room, and I realized I wasn't holding my breath anymore. I was here, fully here, alive, present, respected. Later that week, I received a letter. Handwritten, shaky script. It was from a woman named Beverly 72, retired interior designer, once ran her own firm in Detroit. "Dear Eleanor, I watched you on that podcast with the young host who kept calling you ma'am, like you were a relic. You were poised, graceful. You never corrected him. You didn't need to. Your presence did it for you. I just wanted you to know that seeing you lead again made me pull out my sketchbook after 17 years. I cried when I held a pencil. You gave me back something I thought I lost. Thank you, Beverly." I folded the letter and placed it in the top drawer of my desk, right next to Arthur's old cufflinks, and a small stone Lily once gave me, painted gold and stamped, "You're the Queen." I believed it now, not because someone told me, but because I remembered who I was without the applause. In April, We launched the Reclamation Series, a new client initiative where we partnered with women over 60 to redesign the homes they had lived in for decades, not to erase the past, but to honor it. No dramatic before and afters. No minimalism for the sake of trends. Just thoughtful restoration. A living memory, made elegant again. We called the first one the Margaret House. She was 81, recently widowed, and wanted her kitchen redone to reflect the colors of her mother's garden in Provence. When we unveiled the design, she whispered, "It feels like her voice is still here." I excused myself and cried in the bathroom. Because that's why we do what we do. Not for profit, but for presence. Meanwhile, Blair had found work consulting for a tech-forward design startup. The kind with exposed brick, standing desks, and kombucha on tap. We didn't talk often, but one evening in May, she sent me a message. "We're trying to rebrand. I keep thinking about the way you said, legacy isn't a photo on the wall." That stuck with me. Hope you're well. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a crack in the wall. And cracks are how the light gets in. One evening, Adam came by the office. He asked if I had a minute. We sat across from each other in the conference room where I had fired his wife months earlier. "I've been thinking," he said, rubbing the back of his neck like he used to as a boy. "About everything. About how I let you be treated. About how I didn't realize how much you still carried. You were caught in the middle." "No," he said. "That's not good enough. I hit in the middle, and that cost us both." I stayed quiet. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. A proposal. Inside it, plans to open a G&H mentorship program for midlife women returning to design after long gaps: motherhood, caregiving, illness, grief. It would be called the Second Light Initiative. I blinked. "Do you like it?" he asked, nervous. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, and finally reached across the table for his hand. He held it like he used to when he was 5. And just like that, some part of us began to mend. In June, I turned 66. Lily baked a carrot cake and wrote, "Fire Queen," in orange icing. Everyone in the office gathered in the courtyard, laughter bouncing off brick. There was champagne, paper crowns. Even Jonas, the shy intern, wore one and handed me a bouquet of wildflowers. I stood up to say something. The room went still. "I don't need to make a speech," I said. "But I will say this for those of you wondering how long you'll be allowed to matter in this world. Let me remind you, you don't need permission. You don't age out of purpose, or passion, or power." They clapped, but not because I asked them to, because they felt it. That night, I walked the halls alone. Rooms still glowed, designs half finished on walls. Life, in motion. I passed by the old branding slogan in the hallway, still visible beneath the new paint. Elevate the everyday. We had tried. We had stumbled. And now, we were rising again. Not perfect, not unscarred, but deeply, defiantly alive. So here's the truth of it all. My daughter-in-law called me worthless. And maybe, for a moment, I believed it. But only because I had already started to fade in my own eyes. I had accepted silence as grace. Invisibility as wisdom. No more. Not now. Not ever again. Because women like me, we don't vanish. We don't retire into the background of our own legacies. We build. We return. We reclaim. And when the world forgets what we're worth, we remind it.